Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this engaging two-part series of the Hangar Z Podcast, Tony Webber and I welcome Dale Head, a seasoned expert in aerial firefighting. With a rich background in both the fire service and aviation, Dale shares his journey and insights into the high-stakes world of aerial firefighting. The conversation kicks off with Dale's experiences in the field, highlighting the vital role of air attack and initial fire responses, and the challenges that come with managing aerial operations. Listeners will hear about the controlled chaos of firefighting missions where constant deconfliction is essential for safety and efficiency. Dale discusses the various aircraft employed in these missions, along with specialized equipment like infrared cameras that enhance firefighting efforts. Dale's passion for music also comes to light as he shares anecdotes from his unique band projects, infusing humor and camaraderie into the discussion. Alongside funny stories from their firefighting careers, the group emphasizes the importance of safety gear and the critical nature of mentorship within the fire service and the aviation industry. As the owner of a company that provides aerial firefighting services, Dale reflects on memorable fires and the complexities of maintaining and managing a fleet of aircraft. Finally, he offers valuable advice for those aspiring to enter the field of public safety aviation, inspiring newcomers to embrace the challenges and rewards of this vital career path. Join us for a compelling conversation that combines expertise, humor, and heartfelt messages about community and mentorship in the world of aerial firefighting. Thank you to our sponsors, Becker Avionics, Summit Aviation, and SpectraLab.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, Jon Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
And Dale, can you talk about leaving Union Aero and then kind of how you wound up at the decision to start your own business and what that looked like?
Well, after Aero Union went out of business, there went a whole bunch of firefighting jobs all at once, and so people were finding places to go, and I wasn't quite well networked yet, so I was lucky to get a job. I went and flew ISR missions in Afghanistan, and that was kind of the same sort of community. We were there supporting the guys on the ground and also providing intel to CENTCOM and different people back home. But the people I was working with were the same metal. They were about working with each other and having each other's back. And so I really liked that. And I knew I wanted to get back to fire, but I was going to have to wait until the opportunities opened back up. So I did a couple of years flying Afghanistan. And then I got a job flying a 337, a little piston 337 out of Pullman, Washington. So I gave up my very lucrative job in Afghanistan for a $25,000 job in Pullman, Washington, living in my camper so I could get back to fire aviation.
That's cool.
And so I went and flew up there. And then the next year I got on with Courtney Aviation down in Columbia, California. And I worked for them for a couple of years, and I could never. The lifestyle was tough because you couldn't take a delivery of lumber and you'd have to go to work. And so I did a couple of years with them, and then I went to work for another company, Flying A, which was the one down in San Diego, and they allowed you to have some time off. And then finally, I thought, well, maybe I'm done with fire aviation, and I went to work in a bank job, basically for the state of Nevada, flying DOT for the DOT up here. And I would fly the governor and the head of people down to Vegas. And I was like, I can't do that. And so I was talking with my wife one day. I'm like, what do you want to do? She goes, we think we can run a good lifestyle, treat our pilots well. Let's go into business. And I'm like, really? Back into fire. So we bought an airplane in May of 2019. And I put in my papers with the FAA in July of 2019, and we started the process. And I had the airplane getting upgraded to the appropriate radios package and side-looking IR camera and some of the extras. And so that's how we started. And that was Mindwinder Aviation.
Yeah, that's cool. You touch on something I think is really important. It comes to the work-life balance that surrounds wildland firefighting, and that's something that doesn't really exist. You talk about not only the low pay, in particular for the U.S. Forest Service, but when you combine that with the schedules that surround that, it's really, really difficult to make that a career, because you want to have a family, you want to be present, but these fires take you away and you're gone for weeks at a time. And aviation is the same way. So I love that you made a decision to do something that benefited not only yourselves but the pilots that worked for you, and that in turn allows you to draw from this talent rich pool of pilots that want to come now work for you because you do a good job.
Oh, if only that were the case. The airlines are sucking all the pilots up now. As soon as they get 1,500, they're at the airlines. I offer a job that 10 years ago I should have 50 people out the door for, and we really are having a hard time maintaining the level of pilot that we want, and fortunately we can get them because we do pay better, and we guarantee them money whether they go to work or not. Other companies, I just found out that other companies don't pay as well as we do, which is good, because air attack historically has been a stepping stone position or an old retirement position. It hasn't really been looked at, the air attack pilot, as a career position where you gain the understanding of how to help support that air attack, really manage the fire scene. And they want, I want to be a tanker pilot. So they come to work for you for a couple of years. They meet their people. They go off and fly tankers. And now you're always training somebody new. And so the air attacks are getting, if you got a new air attack with a new air attack pilot, you can drop a couple P's off your plate, And so my goal really, and I know that Hart Drobish of Courtney Aviation feels the same way, who I worked for before. We want to raise that level. We want this position to be a career position. Once you get here, you like the mission, you understand the mission. When the air attack's tired or starts to miss stuff, you can help that person. And that's the part about the job I really love the most. It's once you're out there, I understand fire tactics now, wildland fire tactics, a lot more. I understand the radio communications a lot more, and I really can support the air attack, and that's what I'm trying to create here.
Yeah, that's really cool. We've talked about air attack, and maybe there's a lot of people or some people in our audience that don't really understand what the role of air attack is. Can you talk about the role of air attack and what you find yourself doing most of the time?
The air attack is, if you know what a forward air controller is in the military, that would be something similar, but it's the air tactical group supervisor, which is the official word for it, which basically means I'm an air traffic controller in an airplane over the fire. And so every fire has a 5 mile ring around it. And you have to have permission to come into that 5 mile ring, whether it's a TFR or not. At 7 miles, you need permission or you have to go into holding. So when an air tanker is showing up at a wildfire and there's an air attack present and you have 2 or 3 or more aircraft at a fire, an air attack is required. So as the tanker shows up, they ask for permission. They're given a altimeter setting. So we're all flying by the same sheet of music there. And they're told to come, in from a certain direction. And then they do left-hand orbits while we do right-hand orbits over the top so that we can see them down there and make a description as to where the air attack will make a description as to where they want the retard to go based on the air attacks communications with the IC on the ground and with the different people on the ground. So, sound right, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, that was a great description, because a lot of people not in our firefighting world don't really know what a fire traffic area is or what the boundaries are. And, we're all separated by, 500 feet increments. The bombers are separated from the helicopters, and then air attacks all at the top. So that was a really good description, and it's all about safety. So we're not, two aircraft aren't in the same airspace at the same time down in the smoke. One thing I would ask Dale is, I know down in San Diego, we've had a few over the years. How often do you see an FTA incursion by general aviation aircraft or military?
Well, a few times over my career.
Yeah.
I've been in the air attack role now for 11 years. One time we had an overlapping TFR. Imagine a Venn diagram with the president at Palm Springs, and we were at Bear Valley fighting fire. Do you remember that? Anyway. Yeah. So
that's
we had
a mess.
Right. So I didn't go by air attack that day. I went by my tail number with ATC, and I kept ATC up since I was going to be flying into the presidential TFR in the fire. And ATC called us and sent us over to look at somebody that was coming into the airspace on the northeast corner there. And it was kind of heading for the presidential airspace, but it was already in our TFR. So we ran out there, and by the time I got there, it turned around and went back out. The funniest one, there was a fire in near Santa Barbara. So we were on the north side of Santa Barbara on that ridge. And it looked like a moonscape for miles and miles and miles of just smoke and stunts. And I saw somebody coming into our TFR on my traffic system on my airplane. And I ran over to take a look, and it was some little Cherokee with a yellow tail. And I looked at where he was going, and I saw there was a little airport there. So I popped up that airport frequency, and I called, "Little Cherokee with a yellow tail, do you hear me talking to you on such and such?" And you could just tell it was a little old guy, like, "Yeah."
Is there a problem?
I said, "Just you look to your left. You see the turbine aero commander there above you to your left?" "Yeah." I said, "Well, you're in the middle of our fire TFR, so I'm going to escort you through and get you to your breakfast or whatever." It was a Sunday morning. He hadn't so
$100 hamburger.
He was going to meet his buddies for breakfast, and just and we had a good laugh about it. We didn't call him in or anything, but I just said, "We're going to watch you on your way through, and just make sure that you call before you come back out." So
yeah, wow.
But those are that stuff happens.
It happens.
Yeah.
But your description, like Tony said, was really good of what air attack does. Can you talk about air attack's role in initial response for fires?
Thank you to our sponsor, Becker Avionics. Becker Avionics, new 3D spatial audio will mitigate possible confusion in the cockpit by repeating the last 90 seconds of incoming messages broadcast over any two channels. Check out the new AMU 6500 at www.beckerusa.com.
Oh, yeah. Matter of fact, I got to do a lot of that last year in Region 6. We got called to Region 6, so we're up there most of summer. And there's a lot of little fires after a lightning patch goes through that get reported a couple days later. So we get a report of a smoke someplace, and we'll jump in the plane, and we'll head, and I'll program in the GPS, and we'll head for the fire. And we'll be the first ones there. And there'll be engines coming from different directions. So we'll get over the top. The air attack is generally a chief or or a captain, somebody with a lot of experience of ground firefighting before they get into that role. And so they actually act as the incident commander initially, and as folks start showing up, he'll call them and say, "Hey, it's better if you come in from this way. You'll see the fire." So we can help the ground crews locate where the fire is, and then give them an assessment. I can get down, like I say, we can fly down to 501 feet legally, most of the time 1,000 works, but sometimes we've got to get a little closer so that the air attack can see what's happening. And then they'll start helping the ground crews get in. We'll determine what kind of resources we might need. Are we going to need helicopter? You want a helicopter for this? And you'll check with the captain en route, and they'll say, well, if you think we need a helicopter, go ahead and order it. But most of the time, we wait for the ground crew to get there because they're the one that runs the show. And we're there completely in support of that ground crew. And, let's get a helicopter. Matter of fact, you want a couple tankers? We know where there's some tankers. So we can help them, tell them the resources that are available to them, and then they can order up as they see fit for what they've got on the ground there. And so that's an initial tech scenario.
And what you're describing, that role is very similar in the law enforcement world to the tactical flight officer. I remember I was a firefighter for the U.S. Forest Service in San Bernardino National Forest, so Region 5. And our air attack, I think he was a captain and was later promoted to chief. But he was very seasoned and very experienced. He'd come over to the fire, and like you said, he was always first on scene, or usually. And he's very calm in his description of the fire, putting out all the information until we had the old fire in 2003. And I remember the initial size up, his voice changed, and you can hear it wasn't panic, but you can kind of hear the urgency of what he's talking about. But it goes back to talking about the TFO and the role of voice intonation and using your calmness to keep people calm, but also adding a little bit of urgency in there when you need to. But it's interesting how similar those roles are.
That you remind me of one of my favorite air attacks, and a good friend, Pat Bosch out of Fresno, and he'll talk on the radio. Okay, you see the smoke to the right. Yeah, make a right on that road, and you'll go down about 2 miles. Yeah, and all of a sudden he'll go, "Mother, bitch," yelling at me. No, your other right. Yeah, no. So where the smoke is, that's where you want. I can't believe it. Yelling at me to vent himself so that he can stay calm for the guys on the ground. And I love flying with them. And anyway,
yeah,
that's true.
Tony, going back to your TFO days, how many times did you do that as a TFO? You'd key up and tell somebody to do something, they do the opposite, and you'd come offline and be like, "What is that idiot doing?"
Oh yeah, there are times, when you have either the FLIR recording going or just the video recording, and you have to remember up here that in the cockpit, you're going, "What is this idiot doing?" And it just got recorded, or you said something a little more colorful. And you're like, man, that has to be taken out. But yeah, there's people on the ground that will cause you to have a helmet fire. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
A helmet fire.
Yeah, I remember.
That's great.
To what you're talking about, Tony, would be recording, you'd forget, and your partner would be pointing at the screen. Like, oh, dang it,
Yeah.
But no, really interesting, the role that you guys have, and it's almost two different roles wrapped into one. When you get in the campaign fires, you're kind of managing everything, deconflicting everything, and then on the initial attack, you're directing everything and calling the shots basically until someone gets unseen and assumes the incident command. Tony, any input on that side of it?
Just being one of the people flying below air attack and them running the show and trying to keep everybody separated and safe, hearing what's going on in their aircraft. I've described it many times during aerial firefighting classes that I describe it as controlled chaos. There's all this chaos going on down there with helicopters on the left flank. And you got your fixed wing assets on the right flank. Everybody's in the smoke. And then air attack is about to run out of fuel. So they have a new air attack showing up and they got to give them a brief before they leave. It truly is controlled chaos. And I think Dale would agree with that.
Yeah. And I've always thought, from even back in my firefighting days, our job is to turn chaos into order.
Yes.
And so in the active kinetic aerial firefighting world, you're constantly putting sand back in. Okay, okay, you ate that pea last time, but they gave you 3 more peas, okay, now you got to eat some of the steak, oh, now you better eat that yam because, yeah. Um, and, and it's just, you just keep doing it. And that's why I consider the air attack pilot, and the great air attacks say that they can't be a great air attack without a great air attack pilot, because you can't do that all by yourself for 4 hours at a time without having some back and forth, some communication, and like I listen to all the frequencies, so they'll be off talking with somebody. And I remember one time in particular, I heard somebody say, "Hey, you better move those rigs. That fire's making a push up there." Well, we were like over in Zulu, but they were talking in Alpha. So he was done with Zulu, so I just flew up to Alpha. And by the time that he came around the peas to the steak, back to the yam up in Alpha, he's like, "Okay, let's go to Alpha." I'm like, "It's out your window." Because I knew we had to go there next. And if he was going to do something else, I was going to say, "Hey, man, they're making a push, some fire, they're moving rigs, something's happening unexpectedly. You need to take a look at that."
Yeah.
And that's why, I'm really wanting to find those guys and gals for my left seat and at my company.
Yeah. Another correlation between what you're describing and the tactical flight officer in law enforcement. That tactical flight officer, there's a lot of weight in his shoulders or her shoulders, and without a pilot there to assist or another TFO in the back seat, it's a really, really hard job, especially on a really dynamic incident. So that CRM that takes place between the TFO or the air attack and the pilot, that's what makes an efficient air crew right there, is that CRM. And that's something that takes a lot of work and effort. So really interesting to me how similar those roles are. Moving forward to the aircraft that you're utilizing, what are you flying for the roles that you're doing now?
We've been flying turbine aero commanders, so 690Cs historically my company has been utilizing, but we now have an Alpha that's coming online and a Bravo, and we still have a C model, an 840. And then we've also built up that jet that you saw beforehand. That would be an air attack aircraft this year as well.
For folks that aren't familiar with the aircraft you're describing, can you talk about it? I think it's a twin, right?
Oh yeah, it's a twin. Basically a jet prop. So but burns Jet A. It's got a lot of power, high wing, so that there's no wing in the way of anybody looking out the aircraft. It's fast. That's 300 knots. And pressurized, we can fly up as high as 28,000 feet in the turbine commander, and the jet, we've had it up to 43,000 feet. And so they're fast, efficient. They've got good air conditioning.
That's the most important part right there.
It's really important. I love it when the air attack's like, "Hey, can you turn that air conditioning down a little bit?" I'm like, score, for real. So that, that's what, it's a high wing turboprop. And then the jet's basically a twin jet turbofan. It's like, what anybody might think is a Learjet, but this is a Citation 551. Yeah.
So when you guys go overhead of a fire, what's your typical range? How long can you stay over an incident?
Generally, the missions are 4 hours. So we take off, we go do 3.5 over the mission, and generally within 15 minutes of most fires,
Okay.
But yeah, we flew from Redmond up to Rainier last year a couple times, worked a mission. But that was in an airplane I have that's got extra fuel. We actually have blocked 6 hours in my turbine commander with the extended range fuel tanks, which is not comfortable. And it actually starts to be adverse to safety after a certain point. You just get tired, right? And so there's a lot of reasons to do the 4, 4, and 4. You can get 3 missions in with 3 different mission aircraft. It might be the same one for 2 of them, but that way you get a break in the middle. So that's generally about what we run.
I know on the law enforcement side, we were flying the A-Stars, and we had about 2 hours of endurance typically for missions. And I remember after 2 hours, you're ready to get out and stretch your legs. Yeah. So I imagine after 4, you're even more ready to get out and, find the facilities and stretch your legs a bit.
Right.
again, going back to some of the similarities between the position you're describing and the TFO, the mission equipment's as important. It sounds like in either of those roles, radios, cameras, all those different types of mission equipment. Can you talk about what you guys are using with your aircraft?
Right. When I built my first airplane, I wanted a good aft observer station. So when a trainer was in the aircraft, they could have their own FM radio and their own AM radio. The mission requires 3 AM radios and 3 FM radios. And so that's all up front. But our mission aircraft, we like to have that 4th radio for extra capability, and especially flying in SoCal, man, it's really good to have that other FM because it gets really busy and stuff gets all used up. We put in a side-looking IR camera, no cost to the government. It just helps us be better firefighters. So it just looks out the side. I control it by the position of the aircraft, and there's a screen up front for the air attack, and then there's also a screen in the back for the air attack trainer. Whenever I have a trainee up in their front right seat, they can see the IR, which has been very helpful in finding stuff that we otherwise wouldn't have seen. A couple years ago, we were flying a fire in Yosemite. A new start happened, reported north of the valley. So we flew up there. I went all the way down to 550 feet. We looked for it. We couldn't see any smoke. We were about to call it, and finally I saw 550 degrees on my IR screen. I'm like, okay, there's something there. We haven't seen it yet, but it said 550 degrees. So we hung out a little bit more. I got us the right angle. We could see a wisp of smoke, and we were able to call in a response much more quickly because we had that capability. And, other places I had worked didn't have that capability, and I really missed it. I stole that idea from Hart over at Courtney because he had them, and I flew those airplanes, and I liked it. And then I flew another company. They didn't have it, and I was like, when I do mine, we're going to have that. So that's why we put it in. And it's like 10 grand. You put it in, and it really helps, save money for the government. I mean, really does.
Is that camera system, I think you described it as being fixed, but is it on a gimbal and you can manipulate it, or is it in a fixed position?
Thank you to our sponsor, SpectroLab. SpectroLab, a pioneer and world-leading supplier of high-intensity searchlights for all para-public operations. Visit www.spectrolab.com to learn more about our 3rd generation Night Sun series high-intensity searchlight. When reliability and performance is critical to your mission, count on SpectroLab Night Sun searchlights.
No, it's hooked into a NAC event we have, and it's just a fixed position, and I just have to manipulate the aircraft for the view. But we have it situated, attached to the aircraft at the same exact view that the air attack is at. So he can look out his window and see the ground and see everything and look at that screen, and that's exactly the same view he's got. So that's how we fixed it.
Yeah. Yeah, the advancements in infrared is amazing. Looking at what Shotover's created with their new M2 system and how that is changing the game, whether you're in law enforcement, fire, or I even see some of the news media starting to adopt that technology. Really cool. I remember, again, going back to my Forest Service days, and that was quite a while ago, but I think once a day back then, you'd have an aircraft fly over with infrared, and they'd map the fire and get an idea where the heat's kind of concentrated so you can adjust your resources. But as infrared has become more available, are you seeing that on more aircraft over fires now?
They have a lot more mapping capability. It's become a lot of the different vendors are doing it. I just can't afford $1 million ball, to put in my airplane. So I haven't focused on it yet. There'll be a time in our future where I expect we'll put one in one of our aircraft, but just not there yet.
Yeah.
I'm just a little teeny company.
Tony, from what you're seeing, are you seeing that being adopted a little bit more down in your area?
Yeah, I mean, for us, because we're a combination, firefighting outfit, and we're law enforcement also. A lot of the larger sheriff's agencies, as you know, in Southern California, have firefighting fleets because firefighting is a way of life for us down here. And some years it goes the whole year, 365. There are times where it comes into good use for us having the law enforcement, with the FLIR balls on, is we'll get our lightning strike fires. There'll be a lightning strike, say up on Palomar Mountain, and there was smoke seen, and then we get there and the smoke's gone. And what's nice is you can call in the law enforcement aircraft with the nice full gimbal, the FLIR on the nose, and they can find what tree has been hit because it's glowing. And we can still take care of it, put our helitack crew on the ground, get the tree taken down, drop some water on it. So for us, it's a good tool because our law enforcement helicopters already have it on there.
And then you can just limit it to one tree.
Yes.
And you're done in 3 hours instead of, my goodness, it blew, and now we're running for days and days and losing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why.
Tony, you brought up something talking about the kind of the year-round fire season, and that's something that I think is changing. It used to be a seasonal thing, and I think from like November to May it was not considered fire season, but now that's changed. Dale, have you seen, has that impacted your business in terms of how this fire season has kind of changed to where it's a year-round thing?
We are a call when needed company, so we don't have any exclusive use contracts yet. So it's when things get really busy that we get called. So it takes that fire season to get going, July, sometimes late June. When the lightning strikes come through in June, we'll start looking for lightning and we'll do recon. And then it goes into later July through August and September. And that's really where we do all of our business as a call when needed.
Yeah. When you find yourself busy, I'd imagine you guys get stretched pretty thin over, pretty wide or big geographic area. Can you talk about some of the challenges that exist for your DOM as far as maintaining your fleet and how you kind of manage taking care of all that equipment?
Oh, right. Well, we have a trailer and a truck that can chase down, and we do our 150s on the road over 2 nights. We'll get them in a hangar, and we'll pull in at the end of the day, and the guys will tear it apart. Like by the time the airplane's pushed in, they've already got the cowlings off, and they're working to get it done. We had an engine change in Redmond last year. We made some metal in one of our soak samples, and the plane was down for 3 days while we rented another engine and got it, but it was only 3 days, and we had it going again. And fortunately, all of our airplanes have been kind of in the same area because, the last couple of years as we've grown our fleet. I'm looking forward to seeing how we handle this year with a jet and then 3 turbine commanders. I could see a couple being up in Washington and one being over in Moab, Utah. And we have a Baron, and we have one of my maintenance guys flies twin engine. So he can fly the Baron to we've had them where they fly out, change a tire, and leave, in the Baron, and they'll handle it within hours. Hey, we got a flat tire, come fix it. We had something going. I had an inverter that went out in Moab, Utah, a couple years ago, and my relief pilot was coming anyway, so he brought my maintenance guy. He fixed the inverter overnight, and he fixed it that night, and I flew him back home to Reno that night. So,
wow,
that's how we manage it. It's just, it's all, everybody's just has to go full speed when it's happening. And that's that compressed time where we make our money for the whole year. We can't afford to have an off day. We have to, get that plane back on and going,
Yeah, those mechanics always amaze me. When, working out, you think about the fire season. If there's a fire somewhere, typically it's hot. It's not pleasant weather. And even if you find a hangar, there's probably no air conditioning in the hangar to do that maintenance or engine swap or whatever it is you're doing. Man, I give those people a lot of credit for the work they put in, keeping the mission going.
No, my guys are really dedicated, and they're really conscientious. They're easy to get along with. They've never, they show up and they're just a pleasure. So I'm very fortunate, and I have probably one of the youngest directors of maintenance, certainly of 2 air carriers in the country. When he became director, he was 27.
Wow.
Yeah, he went to Embry-Riddle for maintenance, and he wanted to get a master's degree that they didn't offer. So he talked with the dean, and he wrote his own master's program. So he's the first person with a master's degree in aviation management at Embry-Riddle.
Oh, that's awesome. That's cool.
He was in the 40 under 40 last year too in the AMT magazine. So give
that's cool.
Miles Anderson a little credit here.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
You talk about going to Moab and some of these different places for the aircraft and the pilots you send out there. What's the typical deployment cycle like?
Well, they can work 12 days straight, and then they need 2 days off. So I try to let them work as much as we can, especially when I give them a guaranteed amount of money, and I have to get a certain amount of days back out of them to have them pay for their salary that they're guaranteed. So generally, when we get them going, we'll use them pretty hard for the first month or so, and then we'll start giving them extra days off, or letting them get a ride home in the plane for 4 days off or something. But during fire season, we all just go all the time. Especially this year, we're going to have 6 pilots and 4 airplanes. So if they're all deployed, I'll be running full time. Everybody will be running full time.
You talked about the 4-hour kind of operational cycles for your pilots on fires.
Mm-hmm.
For a given day, a 24-hour period, how much time can a pilot put in working a fire?
You can fly up to 8 hours, and
Okay.
you can be on duty 14 hours.
Okay.
So you come in at 8 in the morning, whatever 14 hours is from there. So that's 10 at night, right? And within that, you can fly 8 hours.
That's a lot of work. You think about all the chaos that you guys are talking about going on below you after 8 hours. I think your brain's ready to shut down and melt somewhere.
You're pretty crispy. Yeah.
So you talked about, again, going back to the areas. Where do you find yourselves flying these fires most of the time?
Well, we were in Fresno 2 seasons ago. Let's see. Last year we were in Region 6, so we were up in Oregon mostly. The year before that, we were in Moab and running around up here in Region 4. The first year I was in Northern California. So it just depends on where the fires, where they call us from. So at a certain point, they start looking for resources, and they're trying to grab the resources. So someone gets us out to Moab. They don't want to let us go because someone else is going to snag us up. So generally they'll keep us for a month or so, a couple cycles of 12,
Okay.
But we don't know where we're going to go. Any place in the West. Yeah.
Okay. It'll be interesting to see, Southern California and Northern California has had a second year in a row of above average rainfall, and it'll be interesting to see what that does to the fire season. And I think in Southern California, these wet years typically produce a pretty nice crop of grass.
Yeah.
That grass burns fast and I think Tony, you experienced a lot of that. What's kind of your forecast for this next fire season?
Thanks to our sponsor, Summit Aviation, a full-service provider for business, government, parapublic, and military aviation, specializing in maintenance, modifications, avionics, interiors, and paint. Discover more at summit-aviation.com.
Well, when we have 2 years of heavy rain, the grass crop is really big, really tall. At least in San Diego, come summertime, it does not take very long before it turns brown and it's dry. Once those fires get going, like you said, they burn fast and hot. Personally, I mean, I'm not a weather guy or a fire predictor, but I'm expecting a big fire season, just from what I've seen in my 31 years of flying and doing firefighting. That grass crop, everything's green right now, everything's grown, and once it dries out, I think it's going to be game on.
Yeah, we have a good snowpack up here, and that keeps kind of the higher elevations green longer. But when you're below 3,000, 2,500 feet, and you get that kind of grass, and it's all through everything, and no one's had a chance to work at it. No goats have been able to make it through.
Yeah.
The old fire scars will be covered with fresh grass, and that'll dry out by mid-June.
Yeah.
And we could see things really going by, I would say, by 4th of July this year. If the high pressures come in like
Sure.
normal, late April, early May, and they start, yeah.
You brought up the goats. I think that's the business to get into. Have a herd of goats, and you just transport them around the West and have them feed, and you just watch them.
Yeah.
I love goats.
They're so sweet.
Nature weed eaters.
Yeah. I walk near my property, and there's these two goats that live a neighbor's house. And when I walk by, they run up and want pets. They probably want carrots too, but at least they'll take the pets, you know?
Yeah. That's awesome.
Just out of curiosity for folks that, have experience operating infrared cameras and acting in the capacity of like a tactical flight officer, what are the requirements for those kind of folks to come over and work in your world as an air attack capacity?
We use the government air attacks to get on our aircraft.
Okay.
And the IR cameras really just, it doesn't take any operation. It's just on.
Mm-hmm.
So when we fly, I can help show them how the screen works, but there's no, it's a TV screen basically that shows hot, and shows temperature. And so my client hires me to provide the pilot in the airplane, and then they get in the aircraft and they run the show at that point. So yeah, I don't have anybody working for me that does that.
Yeah, that makes sense for the U.S. Forest Service or whoever to provide the air attack. So they're familiar with the ground, what's happening on the ground and whatnot. Last question before we start wrapping up. Talking about all the different fires you've been on, what was the most memorable fire that you've been on personally, and can you talk about that a little bit?
I just remember when we realized that the rule book didn't matter anymore some years ago. I'm trying to remember when it was down near Hearst Castle. 2017, 2016, 2017, I think. And I'm with a brand new air attack, and we're flying over some sheetgrass that's burning downhill against the wind. And they did a line of retardant through there, and now it's burning downhill against the wind through the retardant.
Hmm.
And I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I'm like, this is not right. This is there's no rules to figure out how to manage this. Nothing we could do, and that was because of the change in climate and the drying. Everything's dried out more, And of course, we'll see these odd years, but I expect we're going to see some dry years coming up again,
Yeah.
as it goes back to that cycle. But that was really memorable for me because it was just so frustrating. We did everything you were supposed to do in the right way, and it just didn't work. And it should have worked. And so we were kind of flummoxed.
Yeah.
That's one I remember. I remember the fire blowing, the tree blowing up, that heat.
Yeah.
Because you guys are down there all the time in the helicopter, but that was the only time I ever felt it. And I was like, okay, this is something different. Yeah.
Tony, for you, I know you've fires are nonstop for you guys. What was your most experienced fire? What's been your most memorable fire?
I think the ones that I'll throw out, like the Harris fire, we've had a couple of those where they're Santa Ana wind driven, and getting over a fire like that and knowing that nothing we're doing is slowing it down. And then it starts getting into the $1 million plus homes, and you're still trying to drop water, and you see the fire coming up on a line of homes up on a ridge line. They're fine. You go to the water source, and 3 minutes later you come back for a drop, and those houses are burning. From the air, when you're seeing those type of fires, it's heartbreaking. It's gut wrenching. People's lives are going up in smoke, all their possessions. And it's pretty frustrating from the air on those type of Santa Ana driven fires, sometimes up to 50 knot winds. And you're a spectator at that point. There's really not a whole lot you can do. And we've had several of those down in San Diego. So those type are the ones that kind of get burned into your memory, and you don't forget those type of things.
Yeah. Yeah. With the Santa Anas, typically on fires, at least in Southern California, during the day you have low relative humidity and the fire's doing well. And at night it changes and the relative humidity recovers and the fire almost puts itself out. But the Santa Anas come in and you've got low RH at night and day. Fire behavior almost is extreme at night as you're seeing during the day. And
Absolutely.
It's wild, talking about being a spectator. I bring up the old fire quite a bit, but we did the initial attack. We tried to put a couple hose lays in and knock the fire down, and we were doing nothing. Aircraft was not able to launch because of the winds that day. And we did exactly what you described. We pulled out, parked in a turnout, and watched it burn for a couple hours before we could even come up with any sort of a game plan. And then fast forward to that night, and we get assigned to structure protection, and we're sitting in a house for, I think it's 7 or 8 hours. Did a good job, creating a safe zone around it. And the fire came in. We all had to pump out. And we came back the next morning after it had gone through and it's gone. And it is heartbreaking because you'd put so much effort and energy into try and save someone's house. That house is on my commute back and forth from my house every day when I go down the mountain, I see it. And it's been 21 years now, and that house is finally rebuilt. It took them 20 years to rebuild that thing. So pretty sad. Like you said,
it is sad. And there's sometimes, and people that aren't in the fire business, they don't realize when it gets going that hard and fast with a wind driving it, they wonder, hey, why can't you stop this? Why aren't you doing anything? And the honest answer is we can't do anything when it gets to that point. And it's unfortunate. Sometimes you just can't do anything.
Yeah. Well, Dale, thank you for joining us. It's been
thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Thanks,
really interesting.
Awesome meeting you.
Yeah,
me too.
About you and your background. The last thing I'll ask, and this really will be the last thing I ask, for folks that want to get into public safety aviation, that want to get into the air attack world, what advice do you have? I mean, you had that passion and determination to break into it. What advice would you have for someone else?
Well, the first thing is know what the requirements are of what your end goal is, right? Know that when you start so that you can have a list. I need this experience. I need to do this. That thing when I sat with Hoser and he gave me a list of things to do, now I had a task list. I could just follow the checklist to go, okay, I got that done. And then when I got them done, I went back to him. He gave me more things to do. So that would be one thing. The other thing really is to go to the places where you want to work. And this goes with anything. If you want to be a firefighter, go to a firehouse and talk to the guys. If you want to be a cop, sheriff, go talk to the sheriff's officers, see them at lunch. Hey, mind if I ask you some questions? They want to mentor you. Most of us want to mentor, to circle back. So let them help you forge a path. The last thing is you believe in yourself and do it. That's really it. You can do anything in this world, granted, I was born on the 50-yard line. You know what I mean? I grew up with a dad that was in the fire service already. I happened to, I had lunch every day. I got to go to school and not worry about where I was going to sleep that night. But I've seen other people that have even come from more difficult situations that really believed and did what they want. There's a black fire chief in Sacramento City. I used to work in the South area, and I had a ponytail, and I would be on the fire engine. He saw my ponytail going down the road. He goes, if that guy can do it, I can do it. And then he did. And I think that's the best thing I ever did for the city of Sacramento, because he was an amazing chief, an amazing firefighter. But those three things I would say are important. Your own self-worth, self-belief, mentor, find a mentor or two, and learn what you need to do before you do it. That way you're actually focused. You got a focused plan, and there's no brick wall you can't break through.
Yeah, love all that.
Yeah,
absolutely love
advice.
that.
Great advice.
Tony, anything to throw on top of that?
We've heard it so many times on the podcast when we've asked this question, and it truly is if you have a goal and you really want that goal, whether it be flying air attack or flying in a law enforcement helicopter. We have talked so many times about all the obstacles that people have run into. But there's a common theme that all of them say at the end of the day is, I ran into all these obstacles, but I just didn't give up. I didn't take no for an answer. And you eventually make it. And I know it sounds like a big cliche, but it's true. If you want it bad enough, you're going to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. Love all that. It's very inspiring. Dale, it's inspiring to hear your story, having been told, oh, there's no way you're going to do that. Just kind of to what you're saying, Tony. And here you are, you own your own company. You're not only doing it yourself, but you're allowing other people to do it as well. And get to their dream. So, again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you,
yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you in person sometime.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll see you on a fire soon, Dale.
Yeah, hope so. You guys be safe. Thank you very much for having me.
Have a good day.
Appreciate it. All right.
All right.
Take it easy.
Catch you later.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, SpectroLab. SpectroLab, a pioneer and world-leading supplier of high-intensity searchlights for all para-public operations. Visit www.spectrolab.com to learn more about our third-generation Night Sun series high-intensity searchlight. When reliability and performance is critical to your mission, count on SpectroLab Night Sun searchlights. Thank you to our sponsor, Becker Avionics. Becker Avionics, new 3D spatial audio will mitigate possible confusion in the cockpit by repeating the last 90 seconds of incoming messages broadcast over any two channels. Check out the new AMU 6500 at www.beckerusa.com. Thanks to our sponsor, Summit Aviation, a full-service provider for business, government, parapublic, and military aviation, specializing in maintenance, modifications, avionics, interiors, and paint. Discover more at summit-aviation.com.
As we wrap up this insightful two-part series of the Hangar Z Podcast, we want to take a moment to acknowledge the challenging fire season we've just experienced in Western North America. This year has tested the resilience and dedication of our aerial firefighting crews like never before. It was great to hear from an expert like Dale Head as he describes just how intense and demanding these situations can be, from the controlled chaos of aerial missions to the critical importance of advanced equipment in combating wildfires. Dale's experiences remind us of the vital role that teamwork, mentorship, and safety play in ensuring the success and safety of every mission. As we reflect on the stories shared today, we recognize the hard work and commitment of those in the fire service and the aviation community who rise to the occasion when the stakes are highest. To all the firefighters, pilots, support staff, and volunteers who have worked tirelessly this season, thank you for your courage and unwavering commitment to keeping our community safe. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.